You know that moment when you're standing there counting out crisp 20s for some guy in a stained FBI female body inspector t-shirt, and you're thinking about how you could literally shut down this whole operation with one phone call? Yeah, that was my Tuesday afternoon. The moment I realized I could destroy my own workplace was the same moment my boss had just finished calling me dead weight in front of 30 customers. Name's Roy Henderson, 53 years old, and I've been breathing the recycled air of Stonehill Credit Union for 6 years now. To the regulars, I'm just Roy behind window 2, the guy who never rolls his eyes when Mrs. Patterson brings in a mason jar full of pennies that smell like cat food. To the corporate suits, I'm employee ID 4829, a middle-aged liability they're probably planning to pension off anyway. But here's the thing nobody knows. I own the ground they're standing on. See, my old man was a Vietnam vet who didn't trust banks, the government, or pretty much anyone in a suit. Smart guy, though. When he passed 3 years ago, he left me this commercial block buried under a shell company called RH Properties LLC. So while I'm standing here in my polyester vest counting other people's money, I'm also collecting rent from the very institution that employs me. Life's got a sense of humor that way. The smell of this credit union lobby is a very specific cocktail. It's equal parts floor wax, stale coffee from a break room that hasn't been deep cleaned since the Clinton administration, and that distinct metallic tang of other people's financial anxiety. I've been breathing this air for 6 years, ever since I hung up my Army uniform for the last time. 20 years in the Army as an engineer taught me a few things: how to read blueprints, how to spot structural problems, and most importantly, how to keep your mouth shut and observe. Those skills came in handy when I inherited Dad's little real estate empire. I kept the teller job after inheriting the building because, honestly, the health insurance is decent and routine kept me sane after my divorce. My ex-wife Linda took half of everything in the settlement, except the building. Thankfully, she never knew about Dad's shell company setup. The irony of collecting my own employer's rent while they paid me $16 an hour wasn't lost on me, but it made for a nice cushion I called my Freedom Fund. The rent checks clear every month from Stonehill Credit Union's corporate headquarters in Charlotte to RH Properties LLC, and I deposit them into a separate account, $4,800 monthly, like clockwork. Not bad for a building Dad bought in 1987 for $120,000. Everything was running smooth as bourbon until Diana Cross showed up 2 months ago like a management consultant's fever dream. She came from some failed branch in Florida, bringing that corporate buzzword energy with her. Picture someone who read every Harvard Business Review article on disruption but only understood the parts about cutting costs and maximizing synergy. Diana wore power suits that cost more than my monthly take-home, carried a designer briefcase that probably had its own insurance policy, and had this habit of snapping her fingers when she wanted attention. The sound made my molars ache every single time. First day on the job, she called an all-hands meeting in the cramped break room that doubled as our conference space. "Roy," she said, leaning over my station with that fake smile corporate types perfect in management training seminars. "I see you've been here quite a while. We're going to shake things up around here. Efficiency, synergy, paradigm shifts." "Sounds energetic," I replied, keeping my face as neutral as Switzerland. 20 years dealing with officers who confused motion with progress taught me the value of non-committal responses. "Exactly. Old ways are dead, Roy. We're pivoting to a high-engagement, customer-centric model with streamlined operational overhead." She said it like she was announcing the cure for cancer. I nodded appropriately and went back to balancing my till. Over the next few weeks, I watched her like I used to watch the perimeter back in my Army days. Constant vigilance, catalog everything, trust nothing. She alienated the younger tellers, Janet and the college kids who were just trying to pay off their student loans without getting lectured about millennials killing the napkin industry. Diana cut corners on compliance procedures, waving through check deposits that looked sketchier than a $3 bill. She spent most of her time in the glass-walled office, watching LinkedIn learning videos about leadership excellence, while the customer line backed up to the street. The woman treated my building, though she didn't know it was mine, with the same disrespect she showed the staff, slamming doors, cranking the thermostat down to Arctic levels in July, straining the AC unit I'd just paid $4,000 to service the previous year. She kicked the baseboards when she was frustrated, leaving scuff marks on walls I technically owned. But the real knife twist came on a Monday morning when she introduced her nephew. "Team, Diana announced, clapping her hands together like a trained seal. "This is Scott Cross. He's joining us as our new digital banking specialist. He's going to bring some fresh millennial perspective to our customer engagement protocols." Scott was 24, fresh out of college with a communications degree and the attention span of a goldfish on espresso. Kid couldn't count a stack of 20s without losing track at 7, but Diana announced his starting wage would be $19 an hour. I was making $16 after 6 years of perfect attendance and 0 customer complaints. "Roy will be training Scott," Diana continued, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Consider it a mentorship opportunity. Cross-generational knowledge transfer." I looked at Scott, who was busy checking his Instagram. Then I looked at Diana, who was practically glowing with nepotistic pride. "Be happy to help," I said, because what else was I going to say? But inside, I was already running calculations. This was about to get interesting. That's when Diana dropped the real bomb. The new schedule came out the next Wednesday, printed on that cheap copy paper that always jammed in the machine. My hours had been slashed from 40 down to 28 per week, just enough to knock me off the full-time benefits package, but not quite enough to qualify for unemployment if I quit. I stared at that schedule like it was written in a foreign language. 28 hours. After 6 years of perfect attendance, after training every new hire that walked through the door, after covering weekend shifts when other people called in sick with mysterious stomach bugs that always seemed to coincide with beautiful weather. I marched into Diana's office, which used to be a storage closet before she decided it needed feng shui optimization. She was busy arranging a collection of motivational desk accessories. Newton's cradle, one of those hang-in-there cat posters, and what looked like a crystal that was supposed to enhance productivity or ward off negative energy. "Diana, we need to discuss the schedule." She didn't look up from adjusting her crystal. "Ah, Roy. Yes, optimization. Corporate headquarters is pressuring us to trim operational overhead. Lean staffing models, you know. I'm the senior teller. I balance the vault every night. I train all the new hires. You just cut me to part-time." "It's temporary," she said, waving a hand like she was shooing away a fly. "Besides, with Scott coming on board full-time, we needed to reallocate our human capital budget. He's got higher market value, digital native, fresh perspective, millennial energy." My blood pressure spiked like a rocket, but I kept my voice level. "Military training teaches you to stay calm when officers make stupid decisions that could get people killed. You hired your nephew at a higher rate than me and gave him my hours." "Whoa, easy with the accusations, Roy." Diana stood up, trying to look authoritative in her $200 blazer. She looked about as intimidating as an angry Pomeranian. "Scott shows tremendous promise in customer engagement metrics. Part of your new role will be knowledge transfer, mentoring him in legacy procedures. Be a team player here." She let that hang in the air like a threat wrapped in corporate speak. "Or maybe this fast-paced, innovative environment isn't the right cultural fit for you anymore. Maybe you're ready for that next chapter. Early retirement, pursuing hobbies, spending time with grandchildren." I didn't have grandchildren. She knew that, but she was painting me as the old guy who couldn't keep up, the dinosaur blocking progress. I stared at her for a long moment, already writing her professional obituary in my head. "I'll train him. I'm absolutely a team player, Diana." If she'd had any survival instincts whatsoever, she would have fired me right then and there. But narcissists don't see threats coming. They only see audiences for their performance. That afternoon, I took my lunch break in my car and called Lance, my property manager. Lance is a straight shooter who handles the day-to-day operations for RH Properties so I can maintain my anonymity. Former Marine, understands operational security. "Lance, it's Roy. Quick question about the tenant in the credit union space." "What's up, boss?" "They're asking about some renovations. Woman named Diana wants to knock down a wall in the break room. Says she's got a contractor buddy who can handle it cheap over the weekend." Lance made a noise like a tire losing air. "Unlicensed contractors, weekend work, no permits? That's a lease violation hat trick." My thoughts exactly. Tell her no. Remind her that any structural modifications require licensed, bonded contractors, submitted blueprints, and 30 days written approval from the landlord. "You got it. You sound unusually cheerful today, Roy." "Just being thorough, Lance. Just being thorough." I hung up and walked back into the branch, watching Diana pace behind the teller line like a caged leopard. She was clearly frustrated about something, probably the renovation rejection. "Long lunch, Roy," she said when she spotted me clocking back in. It had been exactly 30 minutes. Just handling some personal business, I said, straightening my tie. Well, let's pick up the pace. Time equals money, and money equals success metrics. She tossed her empty Starbucks cup into the recycling bin. Clearly marked paper only, even though it was obviously plastic. I watched that cup land among the newspapers and office paper like a middle finger to basic rules. I stared at that cup for a solid 10 seconds. Such a small thing. Such a petty violation of clearly posted guidelines. But it was the first crack in the dam, the first sign that Diana Cross considered herself above the rules that applied to everyone else. I walked over, fished the cup out of recycling, and dropped it into the correct trash receptacle. Everything has its place, I muttered under my breath. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a one-man intelligence operation. I started keeping a physical file, a black 3-ring binder I stored in my truck. Every day it got a little thicker. Every day Diana gave me more ammunition. Violation number 1, unauthorized commercial subletting. Diana had allowed her friend Kevin to set up a cell phone repair kiosk in our lobby every Tuesday. Just a folding table and a handwritten sign advertising cracked screen repairs. Diana called it community engagement and partnership building. The county zoning office would call it an unlicensed commercial operation in a restricted banking zone. I photographed the setup from multiple angles, including the business license Kevin definitely didn't have displayed. Violation number 2, fire safety code breach. Diana had decided the break room needed better flow for collaborative brainstorming sessions. Her solution was to push our massive filing cabinet directly in front of the rear emergency exit. The red exit sign now peeked out sadly from behind 400 pounds of metal drawers like a hostage waving for help. I took detailed photos of the blocked exit from every angle, including close-ups of the exit sign obscured by Diana's feng shui improvements. Violation number 3, health and sanitation. To cut operational costs, Diana had reduced our cleaning service from 3 times per week to once per week. The employee bathroom was developing what could generously be called a biological science experiment. Black mold was starting to bloom on the ceiling tiles like some kind of grotesque watercolor painting. I documented the progressive decay with dated photographs that would make any health inspector reach for their citation book. But the masterpiece, the crown jewel of Diana's incompetence, was what she did to our HVAC system. The air conditioning had been making sounds like a dying whale having an asthma attack for 2 weeks. Instead of calling our authorized service contractor, Diana brought in her guy, some friend of a friend who worked on car air conditioning and figured building systems were basically the same thing. This genius bypassed the compressor safety switch and topped off the refrigerant with whatever he had in his truck. Cash payment, no invoice, no warranty, no licensing, no insurance. Just $200 under the table to jerry-rig a system that was designed to protect a $15,000 unit from catastrophic failure. I found the text messages on Scott's phone when he left it unlocked at lunch. Kid was showing off screenshots to his girlfriend about how his aunt was beating the system and thinking outside the box. I photographed every text message, every detail of that off-the-books repair job that violated about 6 different clauses in my lease agreement. But the real masterpiece of Diana's incompetence was still developing above our heads, literally. I knew this building inside and out from my Army engineering days. That second-floor pipe running above the server room had a tendency to sweat condensation if the humidity wasn't properly controlled. And with Diana's jury-rigged HVAC system failing to dehumidify the air, the conditions were absolutely perfect for disaster. I went into the server room one Thursday morning to check our supply inventory. The room hummed with the sound of our ancient computer servers and the smell of electrical equipment. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, and there it was, a dark, spreading stain about the size of a dinner plate, with a steady drip hitting the concrete floor. Plip, plip, plip. Most employees would call the manager immediately. I called Lance from my cell phone, keeping my voice low. Lance, emergency situation at the Stonehill property. I need to report potential structural water damage threatening electrical systems. We need an official inspection. You want the fix-it-quietly inspection or the scare-the-hell-out-of-them inspection? I want the full documentation for eviction. Inspection. Send Barry, the one who measures screw depths with digital calipers and cites building codes in his sleep. Barry's available Friday morning. You sure about this, Roy? That's the nuclear option. I'm looking at water damage above high-voltage equipment caused by tenant negligence. Friday's perfect. It's the first of the month. Busiest day we have. Roger that. You're evil, boss. I'm thorough, Lance. There's a difference. That afternoon, I sent a text to my lawyer, Janet. She's a shark in a business suit who'd been itching for this fight since Diana arrived. Draft emergency notice of lease violation. Clause 14. Hazardous conditions endangering property. Her response came back in 30 seconds. Finally. Paperwork's been ready since she hired the nephew. You want damages too? Let's see how Friday plays out first. Friday morning arrived like a perfect storm. First of the month meant Social Security checks, pension deposits, car payments, and the general chaos of people who needed their money right now. The lobby was packed wall to wall with customers. The air was thick and humid because our compromised AC system was wheezing like an old dog, and the lines snaked around our velvet rope barriers and out the front door. Janet, our remaining good teller, was close to tears trying to handle the surge. Scott had called in sick, probably hungover from whatever college party he'd attended the night before, leaving us desperately short-staffed. And Diana was pacing behind the teller line like a caffeinated drill sergeant, shouting motivational business buzzwords instead of actually opening a drawer and helping. "Move it, people! Churn and burn! Customer throughput is our key performance indicator," she yelled, clapping her hands right behind my ear while I processed a complex transaction for Mr. Garcia, an elderly gentleman who organized his bills by serial number and wouldn't be rushed by anyone. "Diana," I said without looking up from my counting. "This verification process takes time. Accuracy matters. Speed matters more," she snapped, loud enough for every customer in line to hear. "You're moving like molasses in January. Look at that line backing up. This is exactly the kind of operational inefficiency that's dragging down our quarterly metrics." The customer I was serving, Mr. Garcia, gave me a sympathetic look that clearly said, "I hope you poison her coffee." The next customer stepped up, a young mother with 3 screaming children who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. The noise level was becoming unbearable, and I could feel sweat trickling down my back in the stifling heat. "Diana, I need to take my lunch break at 1 o'clock, I said during a brief lull. "Blood sugar's dropping, and I need to eat something." She looked at me like I'd asked for a company jet and a week in Tahiti. "Lunch break? Are you completely out of your mind? Look at this lobby. It's like Black Friday at Walmart. Nobody eats until that line disappears completely. We power through this, like champions, or we fail like losers." "That's illegal under federal labor laws," I said calmly. "Employees are entitled to meal breaks after 6 consecutive hours. I don't give a damn about federal labor laws," Diana exploded, her voice echoing off the walls. The entire lobby went dead silent. Even the screaming children stopped. "I am the branch manager. I decide who eats and when they eat. You want a lunch break? Go work at McDonald's. You count money like an arthritic grandmother, you move like you're walking through quicksand, and frankly, Roy, you're dead weight dragging down this entire operation. I should have terminated your employment weeks ago." There it was, the moment of truth delivered at maximum volume in front of 30 witnesses. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ancient fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and that steady drip from the server room ceiling. Every single customer was staring. Janet had frozen mid-transaction with a stack of hundreds in her trembling hands. Even the babies had stopped crying, like they sensed something momentous was happening. I looked at Diana, really studied her face, saw the sweat stains spreading under the arms of her expensive blazer, saw the panic masked as corporate authority, the fear hiding behind management-speak aggression. She wasn't a leader. She was a scared middle manager having a public breakdown while trying to sound like a Fortune 500 CEO. "Dead weight," I repeated softly, my voice carrying in the absolute silence. "You heard me correctly," she doubled down, because incompetent people always double down when they're cornered. "Now get back to work immediately, or pack up your personal belongings and get out of my branch permanently." I glanced at the wall clock, 12:47 p.m. Perfect timing. "Okay, Diana," I said, my voice calm as a lake at dawn. "You're absolutely right. Time to get back to work." But I didn't sit back down at my station. Instead, I logged out of my terminal completely and stepped away from my window. I was done counting other people's money while they treated me like office furniture. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Diana demanded, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "Getting back to work," I said, walking toward the break room. "Just shifting my focus to more important priorities." I pulled out my cell phone. My hands were steady as surgical instruments. 20 years of military training teaches you how to stay calm when the missiles start flying. I dialed Lance's number. "Do it," I said quietly into the phone. "The 48-hour notice?" "No, Lance. Immediate emergency closure. HVAC system is critically compromised, fire exits are blocked, and there's active water intrusion near high-voltage electrical equipment. The building is unsafe for public occupancy. Roy, that's the absolute nuclear option. That means locks changed, power disconnected, everyone out immediately. I'm familiar with Clause 14 of the lease agreement. Landlord reserves the right to immediately suspend tenant occupancy if negligence creates imminent safety hazards. Understood." Locksmith and inspector are rolling now. ETA 8 minutes. I ended the call and walked back toward the teller line, but I didn't return to my station. I positioned myself in the center of the lobby where everyone could see me clearly. "I thought I gave you a direct order to return to work," Diana snarled, spotting me. "I am working, Diana," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent lobby. "I'm just waiting for my team to arrive." "What team?" "Scott's sick, remember?" I smiled for the first time in 2 months. It felt like stretching muscles I'd forgotten I had. "No, Diana, my team." While we waited, I let my mind drift through the beautiful, brutal poetry of commercial lease law. Most people think lease agreements are boring legal documents full of whereas clauses and party of the first part nonsense. They're wrong. Leases are bear traps written in Times New Roman, and my father had crafted this particular trap with the precision of a Vietnam-era combat engineer who didn't trust anyone in a suit. Clause 14 was the kill shot, the nuclear option designed for situations exactly like this. In the event of gross negligence by tenant resulting in immediate threat to structural integrity or occupant safety, including but not limited to fire hazards, compromised electrical systems, or water intrusion near high-voltage equipment, lessor reserves the right to immediately suspend tenant's right of occupancy and effectuate emergency repairs at tenant's sole expense. It was a clause designed for meth labs and illegal grow operations. Today, it was for Diana Cross. A white panel van pulled up to the curb outside. A&B Locksmiths painted in blue letters on the side. My dad's old drinking buddy Al's company. His son Keith was driving. Behind the van, a black SUV with Barry the inspector, clipboard in hand and measuring tools clipped to his belt like a contractor's version of Batman. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I'd printed all the documentation the night before, just like planning a military operation. Prepare for every contingency, have your paperwork squared away, and never go into battle without proper intelligence. "Diana," I called out across the lobby. She was still trying to manage the angry crowd of customers, her corporate training completely inadequate for the reality of 30 people demanding their money while being told the computers were experiencing technical difficulties. "Roy, get back to your station this instant," she barked without looking at me. "Diana," I said again, my command voice cutting through the chaos like a bayonet. 20 years in the Army teaches you how to project authority when it matters. The lobby went quiet again. All eyes turned toward me. "We need to suspend all banking operations immediately." "What? Are you completely insane? Get back to work before I call security. I'm afraid I can't do that." I held up the manila envelope. "I'm resigning from being your employee, Diana, but I'm accepting a new position effective immediately." "What position? Walmart greeter?" She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. I took 3 steps closer to the center of the lobby, positioning myself where every customer and employee could see me clearly. "Landlord," I said. The confusion on Diana's face was like watching a computer blue screen in slow motion. Her brain simply couldn't process the information. "Landlord? What are you talking about?" "The bank rents this building from some corporation." "The bank rents this building from RH Properties LLC, I said, my voice calm and professional. RH stands for Roy Henderson. I watched the realization hit her in waves. First, blank incomprehension, then dawning horror as the pieces clicked into place. Why I knew about the building's quirks, why I'd asked such specific questions about her renovation plans, why I'd never seemed particularly worried about my job security. "RH, Roy, you," she stammered, the color draining from her face. "You own this building?" "I own the walls, the floor, the vault, the server room with the water damage you've been ignoring, and every square inch of property you've been violating for the past 2 months. The front door chimed as Keith the locksmith walked in, carrying a cordless drill and wearing coveralls with A&B Locksmiths embroidered on the chest. Barry the inspector followed, clipboard ready and measuring tape already in hand. Who are these people? Diana's voice climbed toward pure panic. My team, I said, extending the manila envelope toward her. You've been served, Diana. Emergency notice of lease violation and immediate suspension of occupancy. Diana stared at the envelope like it might explode. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely grip the paper. This is impossible. You can't do this. I'm the branch manager, and I'm the property owner exercising emergency authority under Clause 14, I said. Barry, what's your assessment? Barry had already moved to the server room with his moisture meter. Critical water saturation in the drywall, he called out loudly enough for the back row to hear. Active leak contamination near 220-volt electrical conduit. This is a Class A fire hazard requiring immediate evacuation. Keith, I nodded to the locksmith. Secure the building. You got it, Roy. Keith walked toward the front entrance. Folks, I'm going to need everyone to exit the building immediately. Emergency maintenance protocols. The lobby erupted, but not in anger at me. The customers were confused, but surprisingly cooperative. Most of them had heard Diana's public meltdown, and nobody was particularly sympathetic to her situation. Hey, I need to cash this check, protested a guy in a construction vest. I turned to address the crowd, using the voice I'd perfected addressing troops before deployment. Ladies and gentlemen, due to critical safety violations caused by management negligence, this building requires immediate closure for emergency repairs. For your safety and to protect our banking equipment, all transactions are suspended. You can complete your banking needs at our downtown branch, which will extend operating hours to accommodate the inconvenience. You can't do this, Diana screamed, but her voice was lost in the general movement of people gathering their belongings and heading for the exits. Call the police, she shouted desperately. She's hijacking a bank. Already called them, I said calmly. They're en route to assist with the removal of unauthorized personnel from a condemned building. Diana's face went white as fresh snow. Unauthorized personnel? Read the notice, Diana. She tore open the envelope with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the legal document. I watched her read the list of violations. Blocked emergency exits, unauthorized HVAC modifications, unlicensed contractor work, commercial subletting violations, and failure to maintain safe building conditions. This says occupancy is suspended indefinitely, she choked out, until all repairs are completed and the building passes safety inspection, I corrected. Given the extent of the damage caused by your negligence, we're looking at 3 to 4 months minimum. 3 to 4 months? Corporate will kill me. Corporate will fire you, I said. There's a significant difference, though with your stress levels and management style, the long-term health outcomes might be similar. Blue and red lights flashed through the front windows as a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Kevin Martinez stepped out. I knew him from the VFW. We'd served beers together at the annual fundraiser for disabled veterans. What's the situation, Roy? Kevin asked, adjusting his duty belt as he walked through the front door. Landlord-tenant dispute involving multiple safety code violations, Kevin. I've issued an emergency suspension of occupancy under the lease terms. Ms. Cross here is refusing to comply with the evacuation order. Kevin looked around the lobby, taking in the water stain on the ceiling, the filing cabinet blocking the fire exit, and Diana's obvious distress. Looks pretty straightforward to me, Roy. Ma'am, if the property owner declares the building unsafe, you need to vacate immediately. Don't make this a criminal trespassing situation. Diana looked around wildly, searching for support that wasn't coming. Janet had already locked down her cash drawer and was backing away from the confrontation. The customers were filing out the front door, and some were taking cell phone videos of the corporate manager being escorted out by police. You planned all this, Diana whispered, finally understanding the scope of what had happened to her. You set me up. I didn't sabotage your HVAC system, Diana. I didn't block the emergency exits. I didn't hire unlicensed contractors or authorize commercial subletting. I just provided you with enough rope to hang yourself, and you tied the noose with enthusiasm. She grabbed her designer briefcase and headed for the door, Kevin trailing behind like a professional escort. As she reached the sidewalk, the small crowd that had gathered started clapping, not mean-spirited applause, but the satisfied appreciation of people who'd witnessed workplace justice in action. Keith, change every lock on the building, I instructed. The sound of his drill biting into the metal door frame was the most beautiful music I'd heard in years. I walked to the front window and taped up a sign I'd prepared. Closed for emergency renovations due to management negligence. Banking services available at downtown branch. Management. My phone started ringing immediately. Charlotte area code. Corporate headquarters calling about their suddenly inaccessible branch. I let it ring, then turned off the phone completely. I drove straight to the liquor store and bought a bottle of bourbon that cost more than Diana's daily Starbucks budget. Then I went home, sat on my back deck, and didn't answer my phone for 3 beautiful, silent days. When I finally called corporate back on Monday morning, I had 31 voicemails waiting. "This is Roy Henderson, representing RH Properties," I said to their legal department. "I understand you have concerns about the emergency closure. Mr. Henderson, we need immediate access to resume operations. What you need is a new manager who understands basic building safety codes. Diana Cross has been terminated, I assume?" Silence. Then, "What are your terms for reopening?" "New lease at current market rates, $9,600 monthly instead of your current $4,800. All emergency repairs completed at your expense before reopening. And I approve any future management appointments." The bank had no choice. They signed the new lease within a week. My rental income doubled overnight. My freedom fund became a fortress. And I bought that 22-foot fishing boat I'd been eyeing for years. Janet came back as branch manager when we reopened 3 months later. Scott never reapplied. Last I heard, Diana was selling insurance in Tampa, and Scott was back in his parents' basement playing video games. Sometimes the quiet professional really does have the loudest voice. You just have to know when to use it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with my boat and a cold beer. The phone can keep ringing.